importance of discussing things and understanding opinions, and especially understanding people who have opinions that you don't agree with. And what we're going to portray here is a meeting that never took place. And keep that in mind, and keep it in mind in your own lives. So, welcome, Mr. Lincoln, Mr. Davis. Let's start off with you, Mr. Lincoln. Could you please tell us about your political career and your qualifications to be president?
I'm not sure anybody's ever qualified to be president, but my political career goes back over 4 terms as a member of the General Assembly of the State of Illinois. I served 1 term in Congress from 1847 to 1849 as a member of the Whig Party. I had been an attorney since 1837, but I've always thought that it's very important that as American citizens we serve the public good as much as possible. So I'm honored that the American people have felt confident enough to allow me to be their president. So I'm not sure that you ever are qualified for this position. It's just an august honor that the people bestow upon me.
Mr. Davis.
I'm going to step down in front here just as long as I don't step in any manure. If I do, they just don't smell my boots. I served in the House of Representatives, being elected in 45, 46, and didn't get quite 6 to 8 months in because I went off to fight the war in Mexico. Also West Point military graduate. Came back and was elected to the Senate for 47, then I resigned in 51 to run for governor, and I lost. And then I was selected by Franklin Pierce to be his Secretary of War. And when that term finished, I went back to the Senate. Now, the thing about being a senator, and I'm not going to prolong this, is you work with the legislative part of the government. Now, Lincoln being a lawyer, he would probably say, well, I was the judicial. And so both of us, in a sense, were never governors or executives of our state. How's that?
So, Mr. Davis, is it legal for the southern states to secede from the Union? And on what basis could you make that argument?
Well, I'm going to state my position, whether or not anybody agrees with it, is to be determined. First of all, personally, I was against secession. People think, well, since you were the president, well, this all happened before I was president. Starting in 1832, with the nullification, Andrew Jackson threatened to bring soldiers down there to South Carolina and take care of the situation. South Carolina was always close to always wanting to secede. Now, when those 7 states, starting with 6, then 7, lower south, formed a confederacy, that provisional Congress elected me provisional president. Now, my philosophy is, when I left the Senate and resigned, I said to hell with the Union, I was going to go home and do nothing. Because my Union that I fought for dissipated. But when I was called upon to lead the Confederacy, to me, I'm a statesman, not a politician. If your state or the rest of the country asks you to do something, you should do it, and I did it. So as far as legality, there's no provision in the Constitution that states a state can or cannot secede. Now, it's better to do it and then ask later. So those states seceded, and I was elected provisional president and then elected by the people in November of '61, and I served the people. Now, you might say, are you more loyal to your homeland or the whole country? I think most of you'd say, I'm loyal to my local area. So who am I going to be more loyal to, Mississippi or the United States? Do you understand where I'm coming from? So secession is very complicated.
Well, I'm going to step down here also then.
I'll just stay standing up.
Secession is illegal. he very plainly states that it's not protected in the Constitution. Then we have to look back, I suppose, on precedent. If we go back to the Articles of Confederation, the last part of that statement is, and perpetual union. Sounds like to me they meant to stay together. Matter of fact, if you look at Article 2, it said that they will form a firm reliance of friendship. Doesn't say that they're going to separate. The difficulty with the Confederation was, it was one branch. There was no executive branch. There was no judicial branch. There was only a legislative branch. The only great thing that came out of the Articles of Confederation was they passed an ordinance called the Ordinance of the Northwest Territory. However, in that great ordinance, it makes a statement in Article 4 that this territory and any state that is formed out of this territory will forever remain a part of the United States. That doesn't sound like that secession is legal to me. Now, to take it one step further, when we formed the Constitution, we finally, in our preamble, says to form a more perfect union. If secession is legal, then the union is less perfect than when it was formed before the Constitution. To me, the essence of secession is anarchy. So therefore, as the President of the United States, I don't recognize any of these ordinances of secession. To me, they're perfectly just pieces of paper venting their anger at the fact that there's a Republican president in the White House. So in answer to your question, is secession illegal? To me, secession is not legal. And as long as I'm the president, I will make sure that the laws of the nation are enforced in all of the states, regardless of their location.
I'd like to reply, but I'm not going to.
Well, go right ahead.
We should go move on to the next.
Let's move on to the next one. President Lee, what is the hardest decision you've had to make during this conflict?
Interesting.
I think the most difficult decision that any president has to make is the decision to put people in harm's way. The attack on Fort Sumter was one of the most difficult things that any president would have to face. But I have to stand before you and tell you, fellow citizens, when you attack the United States of America, I don't care if you're from Europe, Asia, Africa, or South Carolina, you will not attack this nation with impunity. So as much as I would love it, I would have rather not had a war. I suspect that, as any president, it's probably the most difficult thing I had to do, but I will certainly make sure that this nation is never attacked and that we don't answer that attack. So the most difficult thing I had to do was to basically declare that we were in an act of rebellion and to call it the first 75,000 troops, which at that point we thought would be a very short-term situation. As you well know, it has turned into a very long, difficult struggle. But no president wants to declare war or be in a state of a rebellion. But sometimes those things have to happen. But trust me, as long as this nation is attacked, as long as I'm your president, you can rest assured that it will not be go unnoticed.
President Davis.
Well, I will say that one sentence about the secession is, those secessionists believe that if you voluntarily join the Union, you can voluntarily leave. But the greatest decision I had to make came in 1863 when Robert E. Lee approached me about invading the North to take the war out of Virginia. Now, Winfred Scott, that big 300-pound general, come up with this plan called the Anaconda Plan, which is to basically strangle the Confederacy. And in 1863, Lee says, I want to go north to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and take the war out of Virginia. Now, I wanted more of those soldiers going down to Vicksburg. That's my homeland. As a result, Lee went to Pennsylvania was successful on day 1. Day 2 was not very successful on day 3 because Robert E. Lee's Pickett's charge behind those troops that Pickett was charging up to, there was a cavalry general that was supposed to come up from behind. Guess what? There was another Northern cavalry general that surprised Jeb Stuart by the name of George Armstrong Custer that messed that plan up. So then we leave, retreat, and the next day on July 4th, what do you think happens? Vicksburg surrenders. The Mississippi, the Confederacy's cut in two.
And the fathers of the water go unvexed to the sea at that point. Vicksburg had always been the one key that we need unlocked, and on July the 4th, 1863, we unlocked that key and opened up the Mississippi and literally divided the Confederacy into two halves.
So, Mr. Davis, what would you consider your greatest success so far?
Well, not politically. Because Marina, my wife, second wife, whose picture portrait's on this cockade yet, she would say to me, "You're not a politician." Because politicians have to know how to compromise when each side gives up something. My greatest accomplishment is having 6 children with Marina. 4 boys and 2 girls. Now politically, I suppose when I was elected president, I didn't even want the job. But after I had it, and all that pressure sets in, sometimes you think good things are good and then they don't turn out the way you anticipated. It's like marriage. Nobody's ever been married that didn't turn out the way you thought it would. So you get laughing back then. That's it.
On a political, or certainly on a personal note, I think my marriage to my wife Mary would be my greatest accomplishment. Politically, I think if my political career could be limited to just one thing, I think the Emancipation Proclamation, I would like that to be stand as my legacy. At this point, we have certainly made great strides forward to reinforce those words that were embodied in the Declaration of Independence, that all men were created equal. And I hope that this is that one small step towards that equality. So if mine can only be limited to one political accomplishment, I will take the Emancipation Proclamation.
Boy, I'd like to make a comment about that, Mr. Lincoln.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Lincoln is a politician. He really is. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation to us Southerners was this. You were going to say our slaves in the area that's still rebelling are free. To us, we're seen as a separate nation. A cry for help. And also, Mr. Lincoln, you didn't talk about that provision of adding the black soldiers to fight in the war, which they weren't allowed to prior to, except in the Navy. So there's more to it than that. And the Emancipation Proclamation can get very complicated. And I always say it's like a bunch of hyenas. You know what hyenas do? Well, we won't do it. Eat the leftovers. Go ahead, Mr. Lincoln. I know you're
No,
going to.
let me redirect that then. Let me point out to you, the Emancipation Proclamation was not issued by the President of the United States.
Yes, I know that.
The Emancipation Proclamation was by the Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy. It was a punishment to the rebels. It simply took away a force that they were using against us. I don't claim that it was all this altruistic thing. This was a punishment to you rebels. If you want to claim it any otherwise, then I will certainly listen to you. But it at least has allowed and opened the door to what now may, in the very short near future, Congress has now realized that the possibility of the end of the institution of slavery in this nation is a reality, and have sent to the states to be ratified a 13th Amendment. This amendment will in fact remove the cancer of slavery that had basically lived on this nation since its birth. but it was because the 13th Amendment, issued as a proclamation as punishment, was a very small first step. And I will take the Emancipation Proclamation as my highest political achievement to this point.
And you know, I hate that term rebel, because the King George, George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, they were all rebels. Traitors. But you know what? We magically call them patriots.
That's
So
because
to
they
the
won.
Southerners, we are patriots, not rebels. Just wanted to make note of that.
Well, you also mentioned that they were traitors.
No, I said
never
accused of being traitors.
called- I never called you a traitor. This is a rebellion. The people who are involved in a rebellion are called rebels. I don't know what else to call you.
Patriots.
Then this would be a patriotic war? No, this is a rebellion. Thank you.
President, what do you see yourself doing after this?
Myself?
Yes.
I have a law practice in Springfield that hopefully after this term of office, although I'm not restricted by the Constitution, out of respect for George Washington, I'm only going to serve 2 terms. I think, quite frankly, if you can't get done in 8 years what you were sent to Washington to do, you ought to go home, quite frankly. But Mrs. Lincoln would like to visit Europe. I would like to visit the Holy Land. But quite frankly, I have a law practice. I'm still a practicing attorney. I still have a licensed practice law. So Billy Hearn and I will resume our law practice, and I will go the fade into obscurity.
President?
Well, considering I was elected a 6-year term in November of '61, that means I would be serving 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67. And we would be a separate nation. At that point, I would like to turn that over to the new president and go back to Mississippi and relax, live in Briarfield with my wife, Verena, and our children. Nothing more relaxing than get away from government and so forth telegrams saying you must do this, you must do that, and you're making a decision all the time. And sometimes even when you take it to the cabinet, you might have this be in the cabinet, all of them disagree with you, but you got to make the executive decision.
Well, thank you. Let's open it up to you folks. Do you have any questions for the presidents?
Hear that this week? You heard that, didn't you?
Go ahead.
Won't ask.
Now's your
Don't be
chance.
afraid. There's no stupid question, and we will not laugh at all. Maybe later, but not now.
Yes, ma'am.
Since the main question on the floor that advertises your feeling on the question of secession, how do you feel our founding fathers would feel about that particular issue? They fought to create this country. Mr. Lincoln, your previous answers indicate that they seemed to anticipate that the country would remain united. Yet I know that the secessionists maintain that they also claim that the founding fathers would be on their side as well.
Let me go first.
Go ahead.
Thomas Jefferson, who I'm named after, probably started a big mess. You know what that big mess was? He could not agree with Alexander Hamilton and come up with a 2-party system. Now, the 2-party system is good in some way, even the Confederacy. How many Republicans are you think in the Confederacy? None. How many Democrats? Mostly Democrat and old Whigs. When you don't have opposition, you don't have a chance to compromise. Now, as I say, Thomas Jefferson, I know what George Washington said when he put in his will about freeing slaves, because he could see that being a major problem. He said, I hope our country does not divide over this. But, you know, he never had any children of his own, but his nephews, guess who they fought for? Take one guess. They were from Virginia. Who do you think they fought for? You're right, the Confederacy. See, the thing of it is, it still comes down to loyalty to your state when you want to protect your homeland from invasion. What the Union Yankees did. They were going to come through Virginia, go to South Carolina, and that's when Virginia said, we're going to bow out of the Union. So I really deep down believe that the founding fathers never wanted to see our nation split in two.
I have always contended that secession is illegal. There is no foundation that I can understand where that possibility exists in the minds of the people who wrote the Constitution. Now, there is this theory of, basically proposed by John C. Calhoun, that it's just a contract, that they got together and it's a contract, that we're not a nation as one unit. But okay, it's just a contract, according to John C. Calhoun. Ma'am, if it's just a contract, the people who put it together, would it take all the people to change that contract? It would have to have somebody just doing it. You can't just say, well, I don't like the contract, I'm leaving. Well, that's basically what the people in the rebellion have done. They have wrote up this "we don't like it" thing and said, we're leaving. And now remember, 7 states left, quote unquote, before I became the president. Only 4 states decided to secede, using that in quotes, after I became the president. Under no circumstance can I envision that our founding father says, this is a great idea, we will write this Constitution, and in this original Constitution, we will write a clause that is the self-destruction. Even in your marriage, you don't write your divorce clause. That's basically what they're saying they have, is they have this divorce clause that if they don't like the way the marriage is going, they can get out, and they can get out using whatever reason they like. I'm a lawyer, but I'm a very simple lawyer. I don't have a lot of high education. I use simple logic sometimes, and then sometimes logic is very cold and very calculating and very thought-provoking, but it says that you don't design your self-destruction in your organic law. I can't read anything in the Constitution that even hints at the possibility that they had the idea that at some point of their own accord, any state could enter and exit this union. He used the word the states volunteered to come in. I do have to point out that under the Ordinance of Northwest Territory, in clause, and don't hold me to his historically factual, I think in Article 4, it said that this territory and all the states formed out of this territory would forever remain a part of the United States. That seems pretty firm to me. However, when Georgia ceded what became the Mississippi Territory, which also became the state of Mississippi in, I think, 1815, if I'm right.
1817 is when Mississippi was.
But they said in there, they says, you will come in with all of the privileges of the original 13 states, and including the articles of the Ordinance of the Northwest Territory, excluding the article dealing with slavery. Well, that means they accept Article 4, which means that they will forever remain a part of the United States. I don't understand where this, you can voluntarily, of your own accord, just leave because you don't like the way things are going. Let's think about it for a moment. Let's say that they decide to leave. Did we talk to our creditors about this before they did that? Did we say, oh, by the way, some of the states are going to leave? Well, who picks up all the bills? We paid a lot of money for Florida. We paid a lot of money for Texas. Now they suddenly, are we just going to have to pay it on our own? According to this theory, eventually there will only be one state left. And that state has to pick up all the bills. See, I just don't understand. And I do have a simple mind. I admit to you, I do not have a complicated mind.
Mr. Lincoln, you have a legal mind.
My legal mind says, it just doesn't make sense to me that you would design your destruction in your organic constitution. John C. Calhoun and the people who think it's a contract see otherwise, but even as a contract, I think if only the people who made the contract would have to agree that to get out of the contract, you have to agree, at least a majority would have to agree. But that didn't happen. They just decided, we don't like this, and here's why we don't like it, and thank you very much, and they left. I can't fathom it. I stand here and tell you, in all honesty, I do not accept the fact that secession is legal on any grounds.
Okay, Mr. Lincoln, this won't take long. I'm not long-winded. But anyway, now, remember how I said in my talk, maybe you didn't hear me, how many slave states were there prior to 1850? 15. I mentioned 7 leaving, 4 more when Lincoln calls out 75,000. That left 4 left, didn't it? Now, Missouri and Kentucky will not secede, but they will send representatives to the Confederate Congress, which gives us how many stars? Instead of 11, 13. Maryland can't secede because Lincoln has a legislature who's going to be voting for secession and possibly might not have left, thrown in jail, suspended writ of habeas corpus, and don't get too hard on Lincoln because I did the same thing as president. Okay, and we even had conscription a year before they did. And Delaware. Now, when we invaded Maryland in 1862 with the hope of them joining the Confederacy. So see, there's more to it than just a simple issue, and don't ever leave here thinking the North fought to abolish slavery and the South fought to keep it. That is not even close to. There's so many other issues that we could talk about. So I'm not saying I agree with Mr. Lincoln, but we did not write in the Constitution how to destroy ourselves. No government would do that.
That's what
And by the
you're
way,
doing.
we are a constitutional republic, and some people say, well, we're a democracy.
No.
No. We are even talking about all vote, that'd be direct democracy, where everybody had to vote. We are a constitutional republic. And Franklin said, what kind of government do you have? He said, republic, if we could keep it. Benjamin Franklin.
Let me clear up something real quick.
Okay.
Habeas corpus had nothing to do with the legislature in Maryland. Secondly, if you will read the telegrams that I said, you might as well leave them alone because if they don't vote here, they'll move to Annapolis and they'll vote there. So let them get the vote out of the way. I did not arrest them.
I must have my intelligence wrong, man.
Well, I think you're an intelligent man.
I believe we have another question from the floor. Let's
This
go.
young man.
They don't know how long I can talk. As Elijah Haynes, I would say I stand four square with the president.
No, stand
Thank you.
for square with the country, not myself.
Well, you as leader of a country, but I would say this. You are debating whether secession is legal or not. And I think the thing is, secession is not legal or illegal. It is above and beyond legality because it is dealing with, I think you have to go back to an earlier document, and that's the Declaration of Independence. And it was laid out in the Declaration of Independence why the 13 colleagues in Congress assembled were taking this step of leaving Great Britain. It was because, and they offered a large number of points, that whatever contract existed legally had been broken repeatedly. If you have one side that does not keep the contract repeatedly, then yes, it is because the side that has the power makes the rules, then it would be illegal for the other side to drop out. But secession is above legality because it only occurs when a group of people feels that they no longer have power within the system, that the contract has indeed been broken. Has it been broken legally? No, because the party in power makes the rules.
I will accept your concept, and I will ask you this question. What right guaranteed in the Constitution was even threatened, let alone broken, by the incoming Republican administration in 1861? The answer is none.
Not so much broken as unable to enforce it, and that would be among many, but I would say the fugitive slave law.
But see-
The government tried, but the success rate of actually returning runaway slaves was not all that great compared to the.
Yeah, but we cannot ever have a government run by a minority. The government run by a minority is a permanent solution is wholly inadmissible. And that's basically what they want to do. Every time there has been a question on the expansion of the question of slavery, they have held their breath until they got their way. It's a very good example. Two starving men have a loaf of bread. They find a loaf of bread, they divide the bread, and they're quite happy. One man gobbles his bread down hastily. The other man very judiciously feeds himself constantly. The other man, seeing that he has no bread left, now demands that the man who has the other half give him part of his. That's the way slavery is. They are happy as long as they get their way, and when they don't get their way, they start complaining again.
Yes, ma'am.
I might be wrong, but is there something in the Constitution that says if the people are not happy with their government, they have the right to do something?
Not in the Constitution, but yeah, obviously, if the people themselves aren't, but not when a minority of the people, you're not going to ever make everybody happy. That's why we have two different parties.
But wasn't it divided roughly half and half between the southern
No,
states
not
and
by 1861. There were more free states. And I don't even like that
18.
word,
Yeah.
free versus slave states. But there were more states who did not have slavery than they, and that happened after 1850. When California came in, the balance started. After that, you can watch the meter fill up on the non-hold slave holding. And this is my personal opinion. I believe that the Southerners realized at some point they were going to be such a minority that they would have no control whatsoever for many, many years because of the power that they had. They pretty well run things. But this power was beginning to shift. I don't know whether it was a knee-jerk reaction, whether it was, and this storm was not sudden in its appearance. If you look on our horizon, you can see the storm of the Civil War over the decades coming this way. It was
Mr.
not
Lincoln, I
something-
could probably do a very good job explaining that from a southern
Okay.
point of view, but we have a young man back here who's had his hand up 2 or 3 times, and I
Very
think we've been
patiently.
ignoring him.
Oh, he's a reporter.
Yes, sir.
Uh-oh, now he's gonna write down our answers.
Thomas Morris Chester, Philadelphia Press. I'm with General Butler's command down at the Bermuda 100. And,
General Butler.
General,
You know, they're
you may
making-
not know him, sir.
You know what they're doing with the commodes, chamber pots? They're putting his image at the bottom of them. Okay, go ahead and ask your question. I'm just trying to throw that in.
All right. This is a question for you, Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Since 200,000 men or so that are United States public troops are helping union forces trick your troops, every man lost, I understand you can't really recruit anymore or raise anymore. And a couple of folks that I've talked with in Richmond secretly say that the local military commanders there are desirous of recruiting the black men to come and form a force to defend Richmond. So, with that in mind, would you say that Mr. Lincoln is vindicated on the Emancipation Proclamation?
I would say that as president, I was for using black men in the Confederate Army towards the end of the war. Now you got to remember, I'm president, not dictator. And even my vice president, who ignored me probably from 1861 on, I don't know if you're all aware, he wrote the Cornerstone speech. How many's ever heard of the Cornerstone speech? 1 or 2 of you. Where he said, and he wrote, and then we kind of got distanced some more. He said, the writers of the Declaration of Independence had it all wrong. The Negro is not equal to the white man, and so forth. So even within my cabinet, I would mention this, and someone would say, what are we fighting the war for? See, it comes down to that, which I talked about in my earlier talk, the mudsill philosophy. And underneath the black race, in the minds of many white Europeans, were the natives below. Not citizens either. Now you might say, well, why not? Well, I can't, you know, change takes time. Progress takes time. To convince people this is the way you should live. Any politician knows that if you want to get your plans in motion, you've got to get every single side of the political spectrum on your side, or something won't pass. That's why I said Verena said I was not a politician, and I could not argue my case. Now, by March of 1865, Grant's already doing the Petersburg, and everybody knows what happened at Petersburg. That's our supply lines. So Grant was different than all the other generals. All the other generals that Lincoln went through, 5, 6, 7, I don't want to name them, that'd take a half hour. They would say on to Richmond. But Grant said, bag Lee's army and the war will be over. And when he did bag Lee's army and offered parole to Lee, Lee literally got on his horse, left Appomattox, and went back to Richmond. Could he fight for the Confederacy anymore, or his troops? No. It's complicated. Did I even answer the question, Mr. Lincoln? You're thinking they're going, I don't even think he answered the question.
No,
Did I answer your question?
Somewhat.
thank goodness you're not a politician.
That's a politician.
I have one question for President Lincoln.
Yes.
Mr. Lincoln, do you think the 13th Amendment will pass, and with what degree of difficulty?
Do I think the 13th Amendment will pass?
Yes, sir.
Well, it's passed both houses and it's been sent out to the states. As you know, the state of Illinois ratified it very quickly, so I think my adopted home state of Illinois should be given a thank you for that. I don't see any reason we can't get I think we need 27 states to ratify it. I think it's long overdue. I think it's one of those things that we have to work on. But yeah, I hope by the end of 1865, the 13th Amendment will be ratified, but if not, we will keep going until it is. It's time. It's taken us almost 100 years to get to that point, but as he rightly pointed out, change sometimes takes time. And I've always believed that he who holds public opinion is much better than he who makes the ordinances. You can get much better, a lot of things change with public opinion that you can never get changed with an ordinance. So the man that has sways the public opinion is probably a much more powerful person than the man who actually writes the ordinances. You can write all the ordinances you want, and if people don't agree with them, they're just that, ordinances are written. You have to get the people to understand what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. That's the reason that the president, I have constantly communicated with the people, even when things weren't going well, why we were trying to do what we were trying to do.
Let me add to that, Mr. Lincoln. You might think I'm agreeing with him. I'm going to go back through the presidents and the Secretary of Wars and tell you where they're from and why there's certain influences of, I don't want to use the word catering to the Southern people. George Washington, where was he from? Virginia. John Adams, Massachusetts. Anti-slavery, along with his son, John Quincy. Thomas Jefferson, Virginia. James Madison, Virginia. James Monroe, Virginia. John Quincy Adams, Massachusetts. Andrew Jackson, Tennessee. Martin Van Buren, New York. Now, the man that was only in office 30 days, William Henry Harrison, had a tendency to be Southern sympathies. 9th. 10th, John Tyler from Virginia. Had a plantation, also had several wives and children. 14, I believe. James Knox Polk from Tennessee, Southern sympathies. Zachary Taylor, Southern sympathies. Millard Fillmore from New York. Franklin Pierce from New Hampshire, very Southern sympathies. James Buchanan from Pennsylvania, Southern sympathies. Now the Secretary of Wars. Most of those were from the South. A lot of the soldiers that went to West Point were Southern. You got to remember also, when Lincoln calls up 75,000 and I'm calling up prior to his 75,000, 100 to 200,000, we're talking about citizen soldiers, not regular army. They're the ones that fought the bulk of the war. They're Joe dirt kickers out on the farm. So their opinions of what the politicians were saying, think about it, politicians are over 40, make those decisions, that the under 40 have to fight. So it becomes a rich man's war, poor man's fight. How's that, Mr. Moore?
That's your opinion. But I do point out real quickly, and he pointed out correctly, that long before I called up the 75,000, he had already been authorized to call up 100,000, long before I became the president. It makes you wonder what happened to let us go in peace if they already had a contingency to call up 100,000 men if they wanted to just go in peace. I've always wondered why they needed this army if they just wanted to be left alone.
But, Mr. Lincoln,
I'm just bewildered by that.
but they thought they were protecting their homeland from being invaded. Now, you might disagree with that, but to them, where do you think the war took place? Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, Delaware, New York, except for draft riots, that took place in the South. And the thing of it is, those Southern people didn't look at us politicians. In fact, a lot of them didn't even like me. Thought I was a dictator. Violated states' rights all the time because I was trying to unite those 11 states into a union to become one army versus 11 different militias. State militias. Does that make any sense? If you take 11 pencils and put them together and try to break them, you're not going to break them. So they would be accusing me of violating states' rights.
That still doesn't answer the question as to why you had this authorization for 100,000 men when there was
I
no...
didn't really authorize it. A lot of that was going on prior to me even becoming president, Mr. Lincoln, because I'm not selected until February.
That's when it was authorized.
Well, yeah, but I wasn't inaugurated until February 18th. And provisional Congress, some of those militias were already in effect because for a Southern soldier, or Southern man, a soldier is part of a way of life. Whereas those Yankees, what do? They couldn't even hardly ride a horse.
I'm not even the president yet, and you've already got...
You're right, because you're not inaugurated, especially not inebriated, on March 4th, and I'm starting 6 weeks before you do, or 3 weeks.
Which brings me to something real quick. Their constitution that they drew up, did it have secession in it?
Well, how about West
Did
Virginia?
you have the right to secede in your constitution?
No, because we didn't put it in there, and I didn't write it. I didn't write it. I'm just the president, Miss Lincoln.
Why didn't they have it in their
Yeah.
constitution?
Now, but
Well,
Abraham Lincoln said that West Virginia can secede from Virginia.
incorrect.
Well, the only thing secede really
Congress
means is
approved.
withdraw.
The representation that West Virginia sent to... I had nothing to do with that.
Piermont, or whatever his name was, Piedmont, or
No,
Pierpont?
Pierpont.
Okay, I knew it was something.
Well, the United States Congress recognized him as the governor of Virginia, having the right to allow West Virginia to be formed. Don't be laying things on me that I did
Well, you're
not
laying
do.
things on me, Mr. Lincoln.
I'm just pointing out.
That's our time, gentlemen. Thank you all for coming.
Folks, we hope you all come
Thank
back
you.
tomorrow and listen to us, because how many
And leave
say
it to
I
Beaver
learned a
will be
lot
on.
just listening to these two men? How many say I really learned a lot?
I always learn a lot. Back to work. You keep your room clean.